Okay, there's still people joining, but we'll get underway. So firstly, thank you for making yourself available this afternoon. Kahlil Wilson's my name from Orthotech. Today, we're going to go through the changes to our new prescription form with a particular focus on the 28 pads and additions that we've added to the prescription form and why we've added it. In order to use this, if you're using our software, you need to download it from your portal. So I'll just share my screen and show you what that looks like. And then I'm going to jump between the online portal and the software itself. So once you've downloaded it, your new software should look like this. So you've got access to the client login. So that's the only noticeable change that you'll see on the front page. But as we drill down into the various prescriptions, you'll see a number of changes that we've made. So I'm going to go and log in to the client portal because we're going to jump between the software script and the online script. We probably have 70% of our clients using the software script and about 30% of our clients using the online. But as people introduce their own scanners and iPads and laser scanners and iPhones and things like that, we will see a little bit of a shift away from the software scripts. And for that reason, we are investing a bit of time and money over the next few months in revamping our portal. And thank you for those that have taken part in the questionnaires and the interviews to help us improve this. So this will be changing in the coming months. So I'm just going to log into the online ordering just so that you can see the changes. Now, as we go through the pads and additions, we've got people logged into this webinar that have been using our forms for 20 years, and we've got people that are just starting in the profession as podiatry students or people that have moved across to Orthotech for various reasons. So we'll go through all the new pads and additions for everybody, and then if there's time left over, we'll move into other things that we offer within our script that some of you may or may not be aware of. So now that we're logged into the online script here, you'll see that there's a few changes. So the info buttons that used to be over here are now here, and they're smaller. For those who haven't used the online form, there are some niceties when you're ordering different things. You'll get pictures of what they will look like, or rough guides as to what they look like. So if we go down to Morton's extensions, for example, you can select the different styles and it'll show you what they look like on the side. So as I said, about 30% of our clients are using this at the moment, but for the rest of you, if it makes sense to use the online portal, then feel free. I'm going to go through the scripts via our software because everything sits on one page. So I'll go through what's new to the script, and then I'll drill down into all the additions that we've added and why we've added those additions. So the new things that we've added to the script are a series of drop-down boxes to create more room. So all our designs are now in drop-down boxes. For those using the previous version, we only had 7 of the designs that could fit on the page. We've now got all 9 in the form of a drop-down. So again, the focus of today's session will be on the addition types, the 28 of them, why we've chosen to do it and what they actually mean. But before I get there, we'll go through what we've added. So we used to have a Kirby skive for a medial heel skive. We've removed that and changed it to medial heel skive, but we've also added lateral heel skive. Some people were putting, a 6mm skive in there and putting in the notes lateral heel skive. Got a little bit confusing at times, so we've added that to the script. So lateral heel skive. The next thing we've changed is the intrinsic met dome. So it used to be a no-fill 2 to 4. And the reason we changed it to an intrinsic met dome is that sometimes within a cast or a scan, there was nothing there not to fill. So if you've got a plantar flex transverse arch, for example, you actually can't get a no-fill 2 to 4 in there. But clients are expecting a intrinsic met dome regardless. So it's now an intrinsic met dome that sits about 3 or 4 mil high. Another thing, you'll see some gate plates and things that have moved from additions into cast modifications, because most of the time gate plates are within the cast or the shell. Morton's extensions are mainly in the shell. They were in additions because you could have them as Porin or EVA, but most of the time they are a shell addition, so we've moved them into this column. And we've changed heel spur accommodation from foam heel spur accommodation. We've just abbreviated that. But we've also added a second planar plate tear modification in there. So that's probably the first one that I'll talk about, that a lot of people may not be aware of. So the info buttons here are still hyperlinkable to a website that drills down and shows you what you're going to get. So if we click on second planar plate tear, it's going to give a description and show you what that is. Now, largely what it is this picture here might look to some like a first MPJ cutout, but the shell actually runs through here. So a first MPJ cutout would be further back. So the second planar plate tear modification is similar to a rigid Morton's extension, but it sits underneath the second and then comes back. And it's normally between 7 and about 12 mil long, sitting under the second. Now, you can request in the notes to have it as a third or a fourth or a fifth, but the vast majority of planar plate tears sit underneath the second. So the way in which it works, and I've got one here on my desk here, is that this rigid plate sits underneath the second, and it actually elevates the second met head and metatarsal, and it prevents propulsion through the second met head. So it kind of splints the second met head and elevates it, enabling that planar plate tear to heal. So they're inherently difficult to treat, but it works really well. Now, what some people do in addition to this is add a U-shaped cutout for the apex of the toe. So a normal U-shaped pad would come back and allow the second metatarsal head to drop. The point of this is to have it more distally to allow the actual toe to sit drop. So, you know, one of the treatments for a planar plate tear is to do a figure-8 taping of the second metatarsal to pull the second metatarsal down and elevate the metatarsal and metatarsal head. So we're elevating it with this mini Morton's extension. The U-shaped cutout is for the digit, and that will allow the second to sit dropped. And that will largely be a U-shaped cutout for the digit. So this is a quirky little orthotic with an actual toe ring to hold that toe down. We wouldn't do that for you, but it is something that some people do within the clinic. You need to have 5-finger socks or no socks for it to work, but it actually holds that second metatarsal down. So we've been doing this for a number of years, but it is a new addition to our script, and now can be ordered just with a tick box, keeping in mind that that tick box won't give you the U-shaped cutout distal to it. You need to request that separately, and that would be in the notes. We do have in the additions a U-shaped cutout to the second, but that's for the second metatarsal head. So you'd have to request in the notes that you wanted a U-shaped cutout for the second digit. So I was just checking your question. It was just somebody saying hello. So the other changes, well, the next change is just the way that the EVA orthotics are outlined. So we still ticket and we decide whether we want a 3/4 shell or a full length one piece, but the main changes has been to the trilaminate and the dual density. So with single density, you still choose one of 5 densities. With the dual density, we've got top and bottom layer there. So the top bottom, the first one or the top is a very soft EVA on top, medium on the bottom, and this is an example of that. So we've got a very soft EVA on top with a medium base, and so that's the way that we do them. So it will be soft or very soft through the arch, and the bottom layer will be medium in this example. So you now just choose one of those 5, which makes it a little bit easier than the previous script. The next, well, we've now got the style of rear foot post as well that you can order. So once you select left or right, that becomes available. And then you've got full posts, half medial posts, quarter medial and half lateral. Again, 3D printed versions of those are on the click-through guide. So click through and you'll actually see what they look like. So full posts, half medial, quarter medial, and then half lateral. So they can be done in 3D print, or they can be done in EVA if you're ordering poly or composite or subortholene, which we're still running with. So it's just a matter of selecting what you want, so half medial. And then if you've selected 3D print, it will be printed unless you put, EVA in there. So that's slightly different to the previous script. You'll notice there's also scrolling wheels now going up and down. So that just enables you to move it up and down. You can still type in there, so you can still put digits in there. They do tap out at a certain level. I'm not sure what this is. Okay, so this one's at 40 mil. Just because a 40 mil calcaneal cutout almost takes out the full plantar surface of the heel. So if you need to go above that for whatever reason, then you do need to put it in the notes. But they've been limited at what we think is the upper end. So cuboid notch, we don't really think you should be going above 6. If you really need to, then it needs to go in the notes. The next major thing is the MET dome changes. So we've now got the 4 different types of MET domes that we run with. So MET dome, low profile, MET bar, and kidney dome. So if you go back onto the info, and again, for those using the online script, that's the same information. Just scroll down to where are we? There's MET bar, MET dome. It'll be there somewhere. Anyway, you click on the information button and it will take you through to the shapes and sizes. So click on the MET domes there. So it's got a description on the MET domes and the MET bars. So that's the shape of our MET bars there. That's the shape of our MET domes. But if you want specific sizes, then there's a MET dome sheet at the bottom, which has recently been added. So they're the widths and lengths of our MET domes, sizes 1 through to 6. You've then got your full height ones. It's got the height of the actual dome in millimeters and your low profile heights. You've then got your 3 different MET bars, your widths and lengths, and also your heights, so 5, 6, 7 mil, and then your kidney domes as well. So it's just a good guide for you if you're replacing a MET dome, or if you just want to measure the heights of what they're going to be. So refer to that if need be for MET dome and MET bar heights. And then the big change, which I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through, is these addition types, of which there's 28. So we've drilled down and looked at our most common additions that will probably cover 98, 99% of additions, and there's 28 of them there. Now, the reason we did that, and I'm just going to bring up an example of what we've just been dealing with this week. And I've just put these down. These haven't been all on one script, but we get requests for medial wedge. Now, is that rear foot? Is it forefoot? Is it the entire foot? Is it bilateral? Is it unilateral? Is it 4 degrees, 5 degrees, etc.? So there's a lot of mind reading we need to try and do with a lot of these. We got an SWP, which I suspected standard for single wing pad, which it did. But was it single wing to the 5th? Was it single wing to the 1st? Was it bilateral, unilateral? Was it EVA? Was it pour-on? How thick was it? So there's so much information missing from some of these instructions in the notes. 2 to 5 bars, quite a common one. Now, some people, when they request a 2 to 5 bar, they want our MET dome, so our MET bar. So that would be MET bar. We still need the size, and you can always request that it's placed 2 to 5. But some people reference a reverse Morton's extension as a 2 to 5 bar. And so what often happens is that the orthotic is stopped, put on hold, we need to contact you. It might take 2 or 3 days. Then you get back to us, or we think we know what you want and we make it and it's not what you want. So we're trying to eliminate all these variations or different wordings for the same thing. So first deflection. Now, in your mind, that might mean first met-head, but are we referring to the metatarsal? Are we referring to the first cuneiform? Are we referring to the hallux? What are we actually referring to? What material do you want it done out of? Elevate the first. Again, is that first met-head? Is it first metatarsal? Is it the hallux? And how thick do you want that elevation to be? Sesamoid pad could mean a soft, slow release Morton's extension. It could mean a single wing PMP. It could mean an offloading pad like a reverse Morton's or something like that. So again, not enough information. And a valgus pad's a common one. So if you studied at a certain time in the UK or in WA, then a valgus pad is actually an arch pad. But for a lot of other people, an arch pad is a varus force. So why is it called a valgus pad? So all these sorts of things in the notes actually slow us down and delay your orthotics. And so that's why we came up with this addition type. So we really need to know 4 things when you're requesting an addition. We need to standardize the terminology. So if you want a single wing PMP to the first, well, that's the best way to tell us that that's what you want. We then need to know if it's unilateral or bilateral, so left and right tick boxes. We then want to know what material you want. So let's say you want it out of poron, and then we need to know the thickness of poron that you want to use to have that addition. And so there's, on the online script and also on this script, there's 2 addition types. So if you need to do more than 2, then you need to put it in the notes. But we still want the 4 things. Is it unilateral, bilateral? We want you to use this terminology, and I'm going to go through what each of these are to try and standardize that terminology in relation to our laboratory, the material that you want to use and the thickness of that material. So I'm going to jump into the info session on our website to go through this. Now, Tegan's been doing a really good job of adding pictures to this. So the ones with asterisks at the moment actually have pictures on them. So reverse Morton's extension, it's actually going to have a picture of what our standard reverse Morton's extension is and a description of it. If we zoom in, you'll see the blending. So that's the blending that we do within the pad. So we'll blend it up and we'll peak at sub-met heads, and then we'll blend it back and taper back into the toe box to have a smooth transition to make it more comfortable and less bulky. So in the coming weeks and months, more pictures will be added to these 28 editions, but I'm going to go through each one now, and some of them will have pictures and some of them won't. So a single wing PMP to the first. So with each of these instructions, there's going to be a brief description of what it is. So it's designed to offload the first metatarsal head and hallux by supporting metatarsals 1 to 5. So if we just stop there, we're actually supporting metatarsals 1 to 5, and we're dorsiflexing the first metatarsal itself. And the reason we're doing that is that we're creating more space to offload the first metatarsal head. So it supports metatarsals 1 to 5 and also metatarsal heads 2 to 5. And it creates a really good offloading space for a fractured sesamoid, for a wound, for calluses, etc. So it says examples of use: fractured sesamoids, wounds, calluses underneath the first metatarsal head. Now you might use it also to offload the hallux or a wound or a callus distal to the first metatarsal head. But the one thing to be aware of with your single wing PMP is that you are dorsiflexing the first. So you are preventing the windlass mechanism, you're delaying resupination, you're interfering with first ray function, but largely you're doing that because you've got some issue relating to the first MPJ or the hallux. And if you're doing it out of EVA or poron or something like that, it might just be temporary. So you can always remove the material beneath the first metatarsal itself. And we've also got the most common materials, so poron or EVA, and then the most common thicknesses. I will generally recommend 6 mil poron if you've got the space in the shoe, because you still have some give beneath the first ray. You've got some cushioning underneath the metatarsal heads, and it's easier to remove at a later date. But yeah, they're the most common materials, and that's why they're used. So we don't want things like SWP for a single wing PMP. We want all that information. So single wing to the fifth doesn't have a picture yet, but it's exactly the same, but on the fifth metatarsal. So it will support met heads, metatarsals 1 to 5 and met heads 1 to 4. So it's an offloading pad for the fifth metatarsal. So again, used for prominent fifth met heads, callousing wounds to the fifth. Again, poron and EVA, most common 2 to 6 mil. So you want to create enough space beneath the fifth met head or the first met head to offload it. So there's probably no point in doing these sorts of pads in a 1 or 2 mil EVA because you're not creating enough space. So double wing PMP is basically you've got that on the medial side and the same on the lateral side. So it's a way of supporting the transverse arch and supporting metatarsal heads 2, 3, and 4, and offloading 1 and 5. So again, prominent first and fifth met heads, callousing, so caver's feet. So with those high arch feet, sometimes you've got 1 and 5 that are quite dropped. They're getting calluses, so it's a good way to just support met heads 2, 3, and 4 and offload 1 and 5. So PMP to sulcus. So this is again something that has a number of different names, but if you can use these drop-down boxes in, and I'm just going to quickly jump to the online form, you'll see it's exactly the same. So it's left or right. You've got a list of all the exactly the same additions, material exactly the same, and thickness. So this pops up in millimeters for EVA, but if you went to poron, so it'll pop up in the 3.2s and 1.6s. So slightly different. We couldn't achieve the same sort of pop-up windows within the software form. So if you did 6 mil EVA, oh no, sorry, my bad, that we have added it. So my mistake. Okay, so it is in there for poron. So PMP to sulcus. So this is a plantar metatarsal pad to sulcus. So in most cases, this is just to provide padding underneath metatarsal heads 1 to 5. It's sulcus length, and because we're padding the met head, so it might be for fat pad atrophy or what have you underneath the met heads. Most common it's poron, and that most common thickness is 3.2 poron. You may use slow release poron, but there are cases, and what springs to mind would be an anterior cavus foot, where you've got the anterior component of the foot that's plantar flexed and cavus, and some people like to actually dorsiflex the front half of the foot, and so that might be a case where you select that PMP, so to sulcus, but you might do it out of a firm EVA that's 5 mil, and that way you're going to actually elevate met heads 1 through to 5. So PMP full length. So it just looks like, well, it is basically a full length piece of poron. So the reason we've got the PMP full length in there as well, you can achieve that just by, on our script, both software and online, selecting poron and extension only, and that's essentially going to look like what you've got there. But it's whether you want to have 2 different types of poron. So you may want to have a PMP full length out of a slow release poron, and then you might want to have an additional normal medical blue poron over the top of it. So It wouldn't be overly common, but it's common enough that it's made our 28 most common additions. So 1 to 5 step is something that I think a few people probably won't be aware of. So what we do with a 1 to 5 step is we elevate all metatarsals 1 to 5. But we only do it underneath the metatarsals, and it rounds off or bull noses at the distal end of the shell. So it just drops off at the end of the shell. Most common would be 6 mil porum. And it's like a really flat, broad metatarsal dome or metatarsal bar, if you like. So it just lifts all metatarsal heads off the ground. It doesn't concentrate on the transverse arch. It's not looking at elevating 2, 3, and 4 more than 1 and 5, but it elevates all met heads off. So you may use it for, again, fat pad atrophy or some sort of plantar met head condition where a met dome isn't well tolerated. So the 1 to 5 steps are really well tolerated. And the only difference between the 1 to 5 step and the 2 to 5 step is that we're essentially running that behind met heads 2 through to 5. So we're still allowing for first rate function, still allowing for windlass, but we're creating a broad, gentle met dome. Well, not met dome, but a bull nose behind those met heads to lift them off the ground. You do get a similar effect with the met bars. So if you have a look at the shape of the met bars here, they're quite broad and flat, and they do just bull nose at the end, but instead of having that sort of dome shape to them, which gives you more of a concentration behind met heads 2, 3, and 4, it's across the edge of the shell. So it's not concentrating on that midsection of the foot. Okay, so U-shaped cutout to the second, fairly self-explanatory. It's a sulcus length U-shaped cutout. So concentrating on the second metatarsal head. So offload pressure on that specific metatarsal head. So we've got U-shaped cutout. I might just cover all these 3 in one go. So we've got U-shaped cutout to 2, 3, and 4, but we've also got U-shaped to 1 and 2, but they're under the single wing PMP. So the single wing PMP is essentially a U-shaped cutout to the first. The fifth is a U-shaped cutout to the fifth, and then you've got 2, 3, and 4 here. So a lot of people do use some sort of met dome behind them. If you've got a plantar flexed second metatarsal, for example, one way to offload it is to do a U-shaped cutout to the second, but essentially what you're creating is a hole for that second metatarsal head to further plantar flex. So if the issue is that it's plantar flexed, then doing a U-shaped cutout might make it worse. So generally it has some sort of metatarsal support behind it so that you're still elevating the metatarsal itself, but you're allowing the met head to be offloaded. So I won't go through the next two because they're exactly the same. Horseshoe pad. So I might jump between the horseshoe pad and the J pads down the bottom and chat about them all at the same time. So it's basically a U-shaped, horseshoe-shaped pad in the heel. So used to offload pressure on the central plantar heel by elevating it off the surface of the orthotic. So one of the forces, if you like, when treating plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciopathy, hang on, I've got a question here that I've missed, hold on. I've been caught out recently when I wanted an intrinsic met dome. Sorry, this question's obviously been sitting here for a little while, so my apologies. But the lab notes weren't read until after 3D printing, so it had to be an add-on. How to make sure the notes are read before the shell is made. So our CAD software is now such that if it is ticked, it can't be missed. So we've designed the CAD software. So we own our own CAD software. We've been developing it for 20 years. We've got our own programmers that add things that we need. And one of the recent additions to that is the fact that it will add the intrinsic met dome, and we would have to go in there and deselect it. So if it's on the prescription form, it actually now can't be missed. Now, if this has happened, there was a period of confusion, which is why we moved it to an intrinsic met dome, in that if there was no transverse arch on the cast or the scan or whatever was sent in, then there's nowhere to put a no fill, if you like. And that's what I was saying before. There was confusion about whether we should put a no fill where there isn't anything to fill. So hence why we moved it to intrinsic met dome. So hopefully that's answered your question. It can't be missed because we'd have to deselect it. So there was some human error in, have we added the correct plantar fascial groove? Have we added a intrinsic met dome? Have we added a medial heel skive or a lateral heel skive? But now all that human error has been taken out. It's added in, and we have to fine tune it and deselect it. So that shouldn't happen. My apologies for the late reply to that question. Okay, so yeah, one of the forces in treating plantar fasciitis or plantar fasciopathy is your compression force on heel strikes. So you've got your compression forces, your tensile forces. And so the horseshoe pad lifts the foot off the plantar surface of the orthotic, which might be a rigid material, and helps with that compression force and the offloading of the central component of the heel. But that's the reason why our J-pads also made the top 28, is that we've had this for a number of years, but it's only recently been added to the script, is that if you had medial insertional pain, then the horseshoe pad could irritate because you had a 3 or 4 mil drop off, and it was pressing into the heel spur or the tender area within the plantar fasciopathy. And so the J-pad takes that away. It still elevates it off the floor of the orthotic, still helps with that compression force, but doesn't increase pressure on the insertion into the plantar calc. And we've also, for that reason, got a J-pad with a heel spur accommodation built in. So again, it elevates, but also creates a sweet spot out of poron in the central part of the plantar heel. Now, that's our standard J-pad with a heel spur accommodation. However, you can ask for it to be moved medial and anterior, so we get into that area that is so often tender. And pad the medial anterior corner. So generally, in order to move it medial and anterior, you need to have a heel post on the orthotic. Otherwise, it's kind of just sitting in no man's land. So just make sure if you're moving that heel spur accommodation within the J-pad, or if you're just selecting it on the script here. So I've got our heel spur accommodation. If you decide to move it medial and anterior, just make sure you select a rear foot post so that we've got somewhere to place it. Feel free to ask questions. Sorry, I've got my eye on the question and answer section now. I missed it before. EVA out-toe gate plates and in-toe gate plates. So we get enough requests for them that we've added it to the script. Generally, they're a rigid gate plates are made out of a polypropylene or a carbon fibre, so to prevent in-towing or prevent out-towing and create a changing gait. One of the issues with EVA is that the foot will flex through it, and so it's not going to create as much of a change, but it's common enough. Just be aware that an out-toe gate plate will sit, it prevents out-towing. So if the the patient is in-toeing, it sits on the lateral side underneath the fifth toe to prevent that in-toeing. So it actually encourages out-toeing, therefore it's called an out-toe gate plate. We did used to have on our script out-toe gate plate treats in-toeing, but we didn't have enough room. I think if you drill down into that section of the script, it will say it. So yeah, out-toe gate plate, patient is in-toeing. So there's been some confusion over the years with that. Someone will select an out-toe gate plate because the patient is out-toeing, but the correct terminology is, if you want an out-toe gate plate, it's because you want to encourage out-toeing, and you want to encourage out-toeing because the patient's in-toeing. So hopefully that doesn't make it too confusing, but the reference is there. So the EVA gate plates will look much like these, but they'll be an EVA addition to whatever shell you have underneath. So it might be EVA, might be a rigid shell. Reverse Morton's extension, pretty self-explanatory, but I wanted to put it in here because we do get those 2 to 5 bars and variations, but I've also got the picture here. So it supports metatarsal heads 2 to 5. So unlike the single wing PMP, it's not supporting the first metatarsal at all. Finishes at the sulcus, used to promote first ray function or offload the first met or helix. But if we zoom right in, you can see this is the area here that we will actually blend it back onto the shell. And we'll also blend it distally to transition back into the toe box to make it comfortable. And the support sits underneath the metatarsal heads at full thickness. So again, it's most commonly, it's more used to promote first ray function or offload the first. And when you're offloading something, generally it's done out of EVA. When you're padding or cushioning something, then it's generally done out of poron. So most reverse Morton's extensions are out of EVA, and most of them are between 2 and 4. Reverse Morton's extension, full length, so pretty self-explanatory. It just runs the whole way to the end of the toe box. Again, you'll see the full control runs a little bit more distally, but then we'll taper it down into the toe box, and that's purely for shoe fit. So if you don't want that taper, then you'll need to specify. And it's probably a better pad if you want to offload the helix. Again, it's out of EVA and 2 to 4. Forefoot valgus to sulcus. So now looks very much like a reverse Morton's extension in its shape, but if you zoom into the tapering, you'll see it's tapered on the medial side. So if you did a 5 mil forefoot valgus to sulcus, you're going to have 5 mil underneath the fifth met head down to 0 at the second. So it's same as a reverse Morton's, but tapered. So something that we don't have on a common pad, but we do recommend in certain cases. If you've got like a cavoid foot, someone with a forefoot valgus and a big plantar flex first ray, you can actually ask for a forefoot valgus to sulcus, but you can ask for it to be, say, 4 mil underneath the second and 7 mil underneath the fifth. So you actually get a forefoot valgus taper with a drop off and a space for the plantar flex first metatarsal to sit in. Again, it's done out of EVA because you're trying to control the foot, you're trying to force movement medial, or stop it from that valgus from getting to the ground. So if you did it out of poron, it wouldn't have as much effect. You'll just sort of push through it. So most common EVA, but there'll certainly be cases when you may need to use poron. Again, forefoot valgus to full length is exactly the same. Similar to the reverse Morton's, we'll taper it into the toe box, and it's just a longer control. So, which I think sometimes works well if you're trying to control a forefoot valgus or a low gear loading where somebody's propelling off their, third, fourth, fifth met head as opposed to their first. Then if you can get that longer lever and further into the toe box, then you're controlling that movement more distally into late stages of toe off, as opposed to doing it intrinsically where it's behind the met heads, or to sulcus where it's underneath the met heads, but then you lose that control as the patient toes off. So if they've got a large forefoot valgus, or they low gear load a lot, you're probably better off pushing it into as far into the toe box as you can. And then we've got the reverse of that, so forefoot varus to sulcus. So again, if we zoom in, you can see it's going to be full thickness underneath the first, tapered down to 0 underneath the fourth met head, and also tapered into the toe box. So you're really controlling met heads 1, 2, 3, and to a lesser extent 4. So we've got 3 different forefoot varus additions. I don't think intrinsic forefoot valguses work all that well because generally with a forefoot varus foot type, they're generally quite flat. It's an osseous deformity, and if you just try and control it within the shell or underneath the first metatarsal, then you run the risk of irritation. So I guess the most comfortable is probably the full length forefoot varus, but it's also the most bulky. So if you need a 7, 8 mil extrinsic full length forefoot varus, you're taking up a lot of room in the toe box. So that's probably the only reason I wouldn't use it. So the sulcus would be, I guess, the next level of low bulk, and then the forefoot varus runner's wedge sort of takes it to the next level. And so this is like a triangular shaped forefoot varus wedge, and it's probably in shape wise, it's probably closest to an into gate plate. So your forefoot varus would run in that sort of shape. It will sit underneath the hallux, control underneath the first, and then sort of disappear a bit faster underneath the third and fourth. So just for, and we called it a runner's wedge because people were using it for elite sort of distance runners where you've got minimalist shoes and they're weighing their shoes, and they're that there isn't much room in the toe box. So the runner's wedge refers to it being low bulk in the toe box of the shoe. Cloughy's wedge. So assuming most people know what a Cloughy's wedge is, but if you don't, I might just bring up a picture of it. So it's a wedge that sits underneath the hallux of the toe. So I guess that's this picture here. So the idea behind it is that we elevate the hallux itself, and in elevating the hallux, we're actually encouraging plantar flexion of the first ray. So we're initiating that first ray function, or forcing the first ray down earlier. So as soon as they sort of get to mid stance, by dorsiflexing the hallux, you're plantar flexing the first, and so you're going to get earlier resupination, earlier onset of the windlass mechanism. So again, like everything else, we don't just want a Cloughy's wedge. We actually want to know left or right. We want Cloughy's wedge. We want to know it's probably going to be out of a medium or a firm EVA because you're trying to create a change. You want it to be firm, and it's probably going to be 3 or 4 mil EVA underneath that distal hallux. Cuboid notch, so most of them are going to be intrinsically done in the shell, in the CAD software, but we've got an increase in people requesting soft additions. And so it's exactly the same as an intrinsic cuboid notch in the shell. It's just done out of generally a soft EVA or a poron. So a 3 mil poron is probably most common. If you need that higher cuboid support, then a 6 mil poron is probably a good option because they're going to sink into it, and it's probably going to be an effective 3 or 4 mil by the time they stand on it. Going to 6 mil in a rigid shell could be uncomfortable. So arch cookie, so this is again, I referred at the start to some people referring to this as a valgus pad. it can get quite confusing, but it's basically just a D-shaped arch pad that sits on top of the orthotic. So, and again, out of poron, 3 and 6 mil poron are most common. So it just enables you to increase the height of the medial arch without necessarily using a firm material. Poron heel cushion. So this is something that is increasingly used for plantar fasciopathy or plantar fasciitis to deal with those compression forces. So most common would be probably 6.4 mil and probably slow release poron. Just keep in mind that you've got to keep the heel cup height high. So if you've got a 12 mil heel cup and you want to get 6.4 mil poron into it, and you're putting a 3 mil neoprene on the top of it, you're losing most of your heel cup. So maybe push it up to a 15 or 18 mil heel cup so that we can build that cushion in. Again, you can sort of see the blending. It's full thickness underneath the plantar surface of the heel, and then as we move distally, we taper that off. So we went through the J-pad and the J-pad with the foam heel spur. So I'll move on to the last two, and then I'll open it up to questions. So rear foot varus wedge. So this is a wedge that we add to the rear foot post. So, but one of the confusing things that we come across when people request these is that it will alter the forefoot rear foot balancing. So we will, if you do an 8-degree rear foot varus intrinsically, we will balance the forefoot and the orthotic will be stable. If you then add a rear foot varus wedge to it, we get what we call varus motion in the rear foot post. So the rear foot post will sit at an additional 4 degrees, and the orthotic will actually rock. And depending on where you studied and what your beliefs are in treating rear foot and forefoot independently, some people really want that varus motion. So they want the rear foot to hit the ground at an increased varus angle, and then they want the foot to pronate onto the first to re-engage windlass, resupination, etc. Other people find that quite bizarre, and they want the orthotic to be stable, in which case you need to request a forefoot stabilizing post. So it's a bulkier way of doing things, but it gives you some control over altering the orthotic at a later date. So if you add 4 and 4, so 4 degrees varus wedge plus a 4-degree stabilizing post, then you can grind that and change the angle if need be. And that probably becomes a little bit more important. So I've got a question here. Kinetic wedge didn't make it to the list. Yeah, you're right. Kinetic wedge didn't make it to the list. It probably should. So for those of you who aren't aware of what a kinetic wedge is, so a kinetic wedge is basically a full-length pad with a cutout for the first MPJ. So it kind of incorporates a reverse Morton's extension with a Cluffy's wedge. So it allows the first MPJ to sit dropped. It supports the hallux, so it forces the plantar flexion of the first ray and supports the lesser metatarsals. I guess one of the reasons it didn't make the list is that it's probably known by no other name. A kinetic wedge is a kinetic wedge. So if you put in the notes kinetic wedge, there's only one way that we can do it. So it's pretty self-explanatory. All these other ones have made it because there's just various ways in which you can ask for it that get confusing, that delay your order, or that we think we know what you want, and then we deliver it and you expected something else. Whereas if you ask for a kinetic wedge, there's no other way that it can be done to my knowledge. So that's hopefully that answers the question. And then, so rear foot valgus wedge is probably where that forefoot stabilizing post becomes more important. So people will use a rear foot valgus wedge and a forefoot valgus wedge to treat medial knee OA. So, and a common script would be a 0 rear foot, 0 forefoot, let's wedge the whole thing 5 degrees in both the rear foot and the forefoot. In saying that, we do have enough rear foot valgus wedges by themselves where people don't want forefoot stabilizing posts. So some people believe that the body weight will balance out the forefoot anyway, and they want to concentrate on rear foot. So there's lots of different theories and beliefs out there. What we're doing as your laboratory is trying to give you exactly what you want, which means you need to ask for exactly what you want. So rear foot valgus wedge is purely that. It is a rear foot valgus wedge. You need to request in the notes that you want a forefoot stabilizing post to balance that. Okay, so we're coming up to 55 minutes. So I'm mindful that many of you guys are doing this in your lunch break and have got patients to get back to. So I'm happy to, actually, if you've got a couple more minutes, let me just jump into another change in relation to our semi-custom orthotic. So this has been a massive change. So we used to have 4 designs and 4 rear foot, so 0, 4, 8 and 12 degree. We then added all our designs, but some of them had to be 3D printed. So I've just got another question. Can you confirm if the semi-custom sizing on the script is shell length or first MPJ length? So, and that's a good question, because we've actually changed it from first MPJ length to shell length because there was some confusion in the market. So if you've got our sizing template board, it will have 2 different measurements on it. So you can use this sizing template board, or we can send you the orthotic rings. So you can't read that, it's too blurry, but we used to have the first MPJ length. So if the first MPJ measured 165, which was is a size G, then go for the G. But the G orthotic is actually 160 millimeters long. So there was too much confusion with that. So we still have the sizing boards. The orthotics haven't changed in length, but the measurement in brackets is now the length of the semi-custom orthotic. So getting back to what we've changed, we've actually opened it up so that you can have any degree of varus or valgus. So if you want a semi-custom at a rear foot valgus of 15, you can now request that. You never used to be able to request intrinsic modifications, so you didn't have cuboid notches or medial or lateral heel skives, plantar fascial accommodations, intrinsic met domes. You had outside gate plates. You never had a second plantar plate tear. So the ability to go from a valgus rear foot of -20 or 30 up to +40, I think is a real advantage. We've then opened that up to all our different designs. And if anyone doesn't know our designs or the rest of the scripts, then just send an email to hello@orthotech.com.au and we'll run a bit of a personal webinar if you're new to Orthotech or new to the industry. So you can now order all 9 designs in any rear foot and add any intrinsic modification. Still not custom because we're not dealing with a cast of the foot. And the other thing to be aware of is that if it's not our standard sort of 0, 4, 8, 12, then you will be charged for a small amount for these additions because we're basically building you almost a custom orthotic. So if you get to, 6, 7, 8 intrinsic modifications to a semi-custom, you're going to be pushing up to the cost of a custom orthotic. So the idea behind it is that, you really need a rear foot valgus semi-custom. The patient can't afford a custom or what have you. And then that's the only change, or you really need a lateral heel skive and on a 0 degree or something like that. But if you add too many of these intrinsic, you will end up paying the same as a custom, but it just opens it up and increases that range. Again, all the same addition types are there because we want to try and keep those standard. Okay, so got 3 minutes left. If there's any questions, please fire away. Otherwise, I'll sit here for a couple of minutes and answer questions. Otherwise, you can shoot them through via email. I'll stop sharing my screen and have a look at the questions. So new top covers, are there any new top covers coming in the near future? So one of the things that we're doing is that the supply chain issues have really caused a bit of havoc with some materials. So on both of our scripts, you have click here for available colours. So make sure you use that to check that your swatches are up to date. So EVA, for example, we have run out of some. Now, one of the things we're doing, we've got this firm high performance EVA, which people are really liking for elite sports and building sites and, kids that normally, can smash top covers pretty easily. But for some conditions, people are finding them it's a little bit too firm. So we're going to have the same range of EVA in a high performance soft, which is similar to the other things that we have. So there'll be high performance firm, high performance soft, and you can have them in logoed or unlogoed and 2 or 3 mil. So some people wonder why we put logos on. Is it a branding exercise for us? And I think partially it is, but it's also a good thing for you guys. There's some labs that outsource to overseas manufacturers and things like that. So it gives you association with an Australian-made quality podiatric only laboratory. But it's also a way in which your patients can find us. So we get phone calls frequently. Oh, I need another pair of orthotics. I can't remember which podiatrist I saw. Can I order through you? And we say, well, you can't order through us. We don't deal with the public. But, John Smith was your podiatrist. Here's his details. Go back and order another set. So it's a good way that they can find you again as the podiatrist by coming to us, and then we'll refer them back to you. But if you don't want any of the branding, then feel free to ask for no logo, and we'll just use the ones without the logos on them. Oh, I should have put my phone on airplane mode. My apologies. Okay, so that's now 1:30. So again, I'll sit here for a couple of minutes and answer any questions. Otherwise, feel free to shoot an email to myself or hello@orthotech, and we'll follow up and answer your questions.